name is Cheryl W. and I'm an addict.
Hi, Cheryl.
And before I begin, I want to thank We Grow with Love for inviting me here to speak. It's a real privilege. And I think one of the most recent examples of why it's important to keep the faith is
Yeah.
That's only going in the machine, it's not going out there.
okay. Anyway, right around DACNA time, I had expressed a desire to the God of my understanding for an opportunity to speak because I hadn't done an open talk in quite some time. And so I went to DACNA and I was invited here. And I was also asked to participate in a speaker jam in the Saginaw area back in Michigan. And I was real grateful to be asked because I don't get a lot of speaking opportunities at home. And that by the time I finish sharing, you'll understand why. But but I'm talking about having a relationship with the God of my understanding as a direct result of coming around here and practicing spiritual principles in all of my affairs and leaning very strongly on that God when I remembered to. Now we're going to move up to yesterday when I got lost. Yesterday I got lost and I went 70 miles past here, half tank of gas. And on the way back, I had not seen any signs that were saying Milford or Camp Mac or anything, and I was feeling quite frustrated. I stopped over here on US 6 at this church. The name of that church was Bethany something, probably Bethany Baptist or whatever. And so I pulled in and I said, God, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, and I want to just punch Mike out. And I sat there and I told him, I said, I'm frustrated and I can go back home. And they were laughing, and I was getting incensed by the laughter. And I realized after I got here why they were laughing. Because at the point that I got so frustrated that I was willing to drive back to Detroit, I was right around the corner. And it was amazing. And then I got here, and I read the meditation for yesterday about challenges, new experiences, that kind of thing. And it always amazes me how those meditations kind of always just speak to the day of in my life. And that was another example of the literature coming alive in my life. But anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch, in September 2001, after having had a nervous breakdown, directly after the passing of my mother, I lost my job. So for the past 5 years, I've been unemployed, gainfully unemployed, with no source of income. But during the process, and this is almost 5 years now, in 2002, October, had another tete-a-tete with God of my understanding. And I asked him for a supernatural financial blessing because my finance company for my car was driving me crazy. I told God, I said, look, if they repossess the car, it won't be a problem. I said, because around here, cars are repossessed all the time. And they say that they're stolen, they were in an accident, that kind of thing. And, I said, so I would be in good stead if the car is repossessed. I said, but I need my car. I kind of feel unsafe without my mother, and that's the truth. Before my mother passed, I had never not experienced having a mother. It was real difficult. And I'm not going to say that I had the breakdown because she passed. I'm just going to say that the breakdown precipitated her passing. I'm thinking it could have been more job related, according to my doctor. But anyway, I had to break down. I sought professional help, took the medication. I run to the meetings. I like to share my experiences. I like to tell the truth about what's going on in my life. And I understand that if one of us succeeds, we all succeed. But sometimes we got to come around here and talk about the downside of this process. And so anyway, so I go to the meeting and I'm talking about my breakdown. And so they were happy to hear because where I come from, I'm a good recovering, good sharing woman. And so, they were, you're taking that medication you're using. And I knew she was crazy, that kind of thing. And people were legitimately saying this. But our literature says that when you need the help of a professional, you need to get with one. So I didn't come to a table and ask for permission to go get some help. I went and got me a therapist, a psychologist, and everything that I thought. And I'm going to say this too, I'm a student at Wayne State, and my declared major is psychology. And it was the interaction with that coursework that really let me know that I needed help. It wasn't sitting around y'all listening to the things that, we can sometimes say. It was some stuff in the book, and I was like, I got to get some help, and I can't be ashamed about this. And I got to tell them that I'm on medication. I went to this meeting, and I had a confrontation with a brother, and I invited him to the parking lot. I had never done that in recovery. I called the doctor. I said, you got to change the medicine. Because let me tell you, the psychotropics is by trial and error, right? That was definitely the wrong medicine. And, and I was adamant. I was like, I tried to be reasonable with you. Just come on out to the parking lot. Just like that. I didn't curse or anything. I was like, just come outside. That's all I want you to do. I didn't go through that. Do you know who I am? And I got this much time clean. I didn't do that. I was like, just come outside. I can show you better than I could ever tell you. I'm recovering from stuff like that. And on one occasion, my mother was talking to some of my sponsees, and she told them, Cheryl likes to fight more than have sex. And, my sponsee said, I can't believe your mother said that. I said, I'm not responsible for what my mother says. And at one point in my life, that was true, and it didn't matter, male or female, just crazy. I should have known I needed medication before 2000, but I didn't. And I since found out that a lot of us suffer from mental illness long before we pick up the drug, but it's always undiagnosed. And I found recently at a church event, there was a woman there, and she's a psychiatric nurse. And she said that a lot of us will medicate the mental illness with the drugs rather than take the legal medication. And I was like, she is right. Because there was something wrong with me when I was real little. And I didn't know what to do about it. So I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to get acquainted with Narcotics Anonymous and some coursework that helped me do what I needed to do to get better. So fast forward ahead, I'm off the medication. And I believe that when I got on it, at that one day that I would be. And I have been. I think I've been off the medication now for maybe, I guess about 3.5 years. And I'm going to tell you, that breakdown was the start of something big. Because my life has totally changed. But anyway, still back to this 5 years of unemployment. I paid my car off because after praying this prayer back in October of 2002, on December 27th, 2002, someone gave me $10,000 to pay the car off. A very unlikely person gave it to me. It blew my mind. Now, that was just 60 days. It took God 60 days to operate in the prayer that I prayed. And I remember distinctly when it was. Like I said, it was October 2002. But before the creditors started harassing me, I was trying to use the car to rebuild my credit. But when I got an opportunity to pay the car off, I took the $10,000 to the bank, I bought a cashier's check, and I paid the car off. And shortly thereafter, I received the papers for the first car that I'd ever paid for in my life. I got to talk about how the experiences in recovery, a lot of them for me are new. Having a car might be something that you've had since you were 16. I'm a late bloomer. I got my first car in 2001. I've had cars before they were illegally acquired, so they don't count. I'm recovering from stealing hubcaps, okay? And that might not be a part of your story either. I'm recovering from being in prison every year on my birthday for a whole lot of years. This program has done some things for me. And my faith in God and spiritual principles. This program has absolutely changed my life. I thank God for the ability to read and comprehend. Because before crack, I could read and comprehend real good, but not after crack. I remember first coming into this program, and it was so bad.
concentration just did not work. I had a predecessor call me every night and read the literature to me when I couldn't keep my mind still to read it myself. I'm talking about a simple process that has made my life a life worth living. Before the breakdown, during the breakdown, after the breakdown. So a lot of times at home when I'm sharing, I say, I've lost a lot of things in this process. I lost my mother, my father. I even lost my mind. But I didn't lose my clean date, no matter what. It was my faith in God that got me to this program. And I know we pray for the still suffering addict. But at the end of my using, when I just couldn't do it anymore, I asked the God of my understanding to help me. I went to my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting from the dope house. I did not go to treatment. I've been clean since 1989. Some people say that clean time doesn't matter. But I've realized in my experience, it only doesn't matter if you don't have any. If you have some, it's a precious gift. If you live this program, you have a life worth living. I am impressed with what God has done in my life. And I would love to take credit for my recovery process, but I really can't. And I know that. Recovering from that breakdown kind of restored my ability to see things exactly the way that they are. And I just keep knowing that I'm not responsible for this. Because I got a PhD in messing up my life and anybody else on my path. I'm sitting here crying. I am not sad. I am not miserable. I am happy, joyous, and free. And sometimes when you're a woman, you express your happiness with tears. These are tears of joy. I'm not bent out of shape. You know what? I've never been to camp in my life. I'm telling you, I'm a late bloomer. I'm over 50. This is my first camp experience. I was up this morning at 4:45 saying, woo! Recovery good. Last night I thought I couldn't go to sleep without some off. I was willing to drive to Walmart. I was like, I'm not letting these bugs bother me. I was like, this ain't I know what you did last summer. I'm going to just lay in this bed and I'm going to take this experience in and I'm going to go back and tell them everything that they missed. And you know what, normally, if I go to a convention, I don't do that because there's always people at home that couldn't attend for whatever reason. So I don't kind of want to rub stuff in people's face, but I got to tell them about this, y'all. In fact, I've been calling people and saying, next year, you got to come. And you know what? I don't know what my financial picture will be like next year. I'm willing to pay for them to come. This is one hell of a experience. And you know what? And through the prayer process and through the faith process, when I met you, Joe, I did not know what meeting you taking your phone number would lead to. We were talking about doing the history of the predecessors, and we end up here at Camp Mac. This process is unbelievable. I thank you for asking. I thank you for an opportunity to share my experiences, strengths, and hopes. Because I'm telling you, I'm happy to be here. And when I finish talking and being nervous and everything, I'll be all smiling and, frown up here and stuff like that, and I'll be good. But it has been my faith that has helped me. Because when I went through this breakdown, there's not one member of Narcotics Anonymous who could have helped me. As I continue to share about my experience, and I got to talk about the breakdown because one of the things that I found out, once I was able to go to a meeting or several dozen meetings and admit that I'd had one, I found out that other people were taking medications and that other people were feeling like they were using because that's what some of the more experienced members were telling them. And so a lot of folks got free because I decided to tell the simple,
honest message of recovery, and it rang true with so many people, so people got free. And that's what happens when we come around here and share our experiences, strengths, and hopes. Because when you're lying, someone said this yesterday, we know, but when someone is telling the truth, it can be a thread of truth. You know it when you hear it. You know, I feel that I owe Narcotics Anonymous my life. I'm not saying that I owe my life to the fellowship. I owe my life to God and Narcotics Anonymous. Because I didn't know about Narcotics Anonymous after I started using when I was 15 years old. And I used until I was 36. I had never heard of Narcotics Anonymous. And you know what? My son's father was in Harbor Light. And I really didn't even understand why he was there. When I found out that he had been exposed to Narcotics Anonymous, after I found out about it in '89, I had a real resentment with him. I was mad at him for not telling me about this. Because all I ever heard him do was complain. He didn't want to be there. And I didn't understand what Harbor Light was. And that's because I was kind of strung out. You know, he'd be like, come down here, bring cigarettes and put them on the line and send them up the window and that kind of thing. And I did it. Because that's what we used to do in jail, down at the county jail. We had a line, you know. If you've never been to jail, you don't want to really know. But anyway. You know, and I was really upset because from 1980 to 1985, I was clean. I had stopped using all man and mood altering chemicals, and for 5 years, I was just clean. I didn't have a program. And in 1985, when my grandfather passed, and my grandfather was the paternal figure in my life, when my grandfather passed, I used. I stayed out there for 4 years, and I know that if you go out after you use it, it's worse when you go back out and that you pick up right where you left off. I've got experience with that. But what I don't have experience with is having a program and going back out and use. I have consistently stayed here since 1989. And I always say that I have almost 20 years because I used for almost 20. And my clean time is catching up with the length of time that I used by God's grace. And having faith in the program and you people and the book. I'm a real book kind of person. And I had to force myself to leave my book back at the cabin because I'd have been sitting here going through the book. That's why I know I'm not going to do the 45 minutes because I left the book back there. Because before coming here, I didn't write anything down, but I'm going to tell you this. Faith was mentioned on about 27 pages in the basic text and about 19 in Just for Today. So I'm thinking that in the big picture, in the big scheme of things, faith has got to be pretty important around here. And I know it has been for my recovery experience. It was faith that let me know that I wouldn't always have to take that medication. It was faith that let me know that I could now tell my son instead of the stuff that I used to tell my mother. I always believed that I was going to die using, so I would tell my mother to put a blow in my casket. So I told my son, I said, look, I said, when I make my transition, I don't want to blow in my casket. I want my basic text. I said, and don't put the new one in with the good cover. Put that old raggedy one in. That's right. You know, that's the one that I bought that came up missing at a meeting. And right in the circle, I clocked. I was like, I don't know who took my goddamn book, but you better bring me my goddamn book. And I'm going to tell you why it was so important. Because the $10 that I spent to buy that book, you know, I had been clean for 2 weeks, but I got a check and I wanted to buy me a blow. And so I made the decision not to buy the blow, but to buy the book. And I left one meeting and went to the next meeting and the book disappeared. I was like, well, what kind of shit is this? And so right in the closing, I'm like, give me my book, right? And so this man came out the kitchen. He was like, I got your book. Calm down. I said, but you shouldn't have it. Well, I'm giving you my number. I said, they said women get women and men get men. Why are you putting your number in my book? Right? Well, I found out why later. Yeah. And I found out this. At the end of my active addiction, my connection was a married man. And he had told me if I slept with him, that he would take care of my habit. And I told him no. But that young man that put his number in my book, he looked good to me. He was truly eye candy. That's what he was. Looked good, smelled good, was clean, you know, real different for a person that had just left the crack house. But the problem was he had a wife. And you know what? I got with my sponsor and her sponsor and all these different ones because I was going to sleep with him.
And they kept saying, well, somebody gonna get up with feelings. And I was like, it'll be him. Because he's been doing this longer than me. I'm gonna screw him and I'm gonna go on about my business. I said, because that's how I do it. And they were like, no, it ain't like that clean. I was like, watch me. But something happened. And I was like, okay, Cheryl, because I write. I've been writing throughout the whole process. I said, if you wouldn't do a married man while you were using, how you gonna do a married man while you clean? So then I started praying for a husband, right? And let me tell you, God in his infinite wisdom, he ain't give me one. And so you know what? I don't pray that prayer anymore. Because in my writing, I found out in order to have a husband, you need to be a wife. And I'm not the kind of girl that's going to run your bath water. I may not cook for you. And I don't want you to live with me. I want you to have your own place, your own car, your own money. And I want you to go home frequently. Here's my hand. I'm telling you the truth. So would God send a husband to a sister rolling like that? Of course not. Oh man, let me say this here. For the past 16 and a half years, I've been practicing celibacy. I have not been in one relationship since I've been clean other than with myself and the God of my understanding. It takes faith to do that one. I call my recovery experience a faith walk. I don't suggest this for everyone, because I'm going to tell you, when you see that eye candy, sometimes you forget you're practicing celibacy. And you want to do some things, Even though I'm over 50, I believe I can still swing from some chandeliers. But I won't be. Picture me swinging from a chandelier. And me, the chandelier, and him hurt real bad. But I had to put that spin on it. But you know what? Making the decision to stop sleeping with men that I didn't want to sleep with is one of the greatest decisions that I made. And it started with that young man putting his number in the book. I call him friend because he's a person that's been consistently accessible to me throughout my recovery. And the thing that I kept realizing about the sex is like after I slept with people, they kept leaving. So, I stopped sleeping with people and people started staying. And I was like, oh, I'm liking this. This is real different. I'm going to stick with this. And so that's what I've done. And like I said, it's been a real blessing for me to practice faith long enough to have a relationship with two of the most important people in my life, and that's myself and God. Because that's something that I had never had. I hated myself when I got here, y'all. I don't know how y'all came, but I hated Cheryl, and I did everything to destroy my life. I have come here. I have learned how to tolerate Cheryl. I love Cheryl on most days, and I'm okay right where I'm at. I'm telling you, it takes faith and courage to pull off my look. And I'm aware of it because I'm not doing hair weaves, I'm not doing pedicures and manicures, but I do massages, Kelly. Love a massage, right? I'm into pampering Cheryl because I did a lot of things to myself, and I'm aware of that. And so now I'm trying to undo some of that damage and some of that stuff that I do to me and to others. I'm trying to eliminate that kind of thing from my life. So anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch, when my father died, my father was extremely wealthy. And we had this serious probate matter. And I kept praying through the probate matter that, because it was messy, that I would get what I was supposed to get. We had a family meeting before my dad passed. My father asked them if they wanted the house. They all said no. And I told my father that I wanted it. And he said, okay, well, you can have it. But anyway, my father was a rolling stone, for real. And he had all these children with different mothers. And he had one mother that had more children than my mother. I'm an only child. And so they got together and they stole everything in the estate, including the house, all of the money. But, I was able to get a few dollars out of that. And I was talking to God, and I said, I needed that house. I said, and that I wanted that house, and that my father wanted me to have it. I said, but it didn't work out that way. But I'm believing that I'm going to get what I'm supposed to. And what I got is this, y'all. I have 16 and a half years clean. I live in the projects. And since I have not had an income in 5 years, I'm grateful to have a roof over my head anywhere. I didn't get that house, but I have a house. And I don't have to do what you want me to do to stay in it. The God of my understanding provided a roof, all the things that he promises in this word, and I'm not trying to offend anyone. He is actuated in my life. I got roof, shelter, and I can come to Camp Mac with no job. Oh, God is batting 1,002 with me. Yeah. I'm grateful for the things that are happening in my life. And I'm going to say this too. I got a phone call yesterday that I didn't answer. And that phone call was from my mentor. And he told me, he said, I got good news for you. Every time he called, he say that. Sometimes it is and sometimes it ain't, but he's been my mentor for over 20 years. And so we got a pretty good relationship. He told me, he said, we got a job for you. And I listened to this message last night when I got back to the cabin. He told me how much the job paid, which is about $17 an hour, and that kind of thing. Excuse me. And I said I was impressed, but as long as I've been unemployed, I would take one that pays $5.15. I told the God of my understanding, I need something to do to fill these idle hours. 5 years of idle hours is not a good thing. Trust me. Obsession and compulsion kicks in and all kinds of other stuff. And so anyway, when I go back home, I'm going to call and make arrangements to go see about that position. The position requires 2 years, a 2-year degree, and I'm very close to graduation. And so I'm probably qualified for the position, and if it is available to me, I'm going to take it. Again, back to the faith. I remember praying for a job back in '99, and I got that very good job. That's the job that provided the medical coverage to pay for the breakdown. I had to take a medical leave while I was at that job. And you know what? I'm going to tell you this too. I prayed for that job, and that was a job that if you had felony convictions, you're not supposed to be able to get that job. God opened up that door, and I got that job, and I was so grateful to get the job, for as long as we know how to be grateful. And I remember my last day there, I remember telling my superintendent of transportation to take that job and shove it. I was at a meeting about 6 months ago. I said, when I got that job, I was grateful to get it. Employment is real difficult in Detroit right now because, as you know, we're the motor city and we're very dependent upon the automobile industry. It's either the automobile industry, the funeral industry, or the recovery industry in Detroit. That's it. And it's been hard. I'm not saying that for 5 years I've sat at home and not looked for work. I was hired for a position. And after I found out I was hired for the position, I took a vacation. And when I came back, I went to go start the job, and they told me that I didn't have it. I said, I've never been hired for a job, and then when it's time to start the job, I don't start. But I accepted that. I cried. I called my son, and I told him, I said, I said, this job that I was celebrating, I don't have. And so the journey continues without this income, you know what I'm saying? But I got to tell you, in these past 5 years, I went to Disneyland. All expenses paid. I'd always wanted to go, but I always got to the dope house before. I went to Disneyland. And I mean, like a little kid, I went to all the amusement park. I'm telling you, I am such a late bloomer. I hate to admit this stuff to y'all, because y'all might not be late bloomers. Y'all might be real mature and stuff, but I'm not. Anyway, I'm at Disneyland. I'm having a ball, and I'm thanking God for sending me to Disneyland without a job. Now, do you know that if I had a job, Disneyland is something that I wouldn't have been able to do? Because I'd have had to go to work. I drove public transportation. I'd have to go to work. You know, and they, you know, if you don't have enough time, and you can't tell public transportation I'm not coming because I'm going to Disneyland. They don't give a darn. You better come and drive this bus. You know. And the thing that made me tell him to shove, you know, take the job and shove it, they gave me a bus, sit me out on the freeway, and the bus wouldn't do 5 miles an hour during rush hour traffic. I'm really afraid. I'm scared to death. And I'm hoping that some of these road ragers in Detroit don't hurt me. Now, they're sitting back in the cut while I'm out on the freeway with these nuts talking about bring the bus back 2 cities. I said, not. Come get your bus. They were like, what? Put the flashers on and bring the bus back. I said, no, send a pickup, send a tow truck. I'm not driving the bus back. And when I got back there, you're out of service. I said, okay. And while you playing, take this job and shove it. Walked out the door, ain't worked nowhere since. Man, that was a big mistake. I'm not happy that I told him to shove it. That's the same job that I prayed for. That's the same job that God opened the door. I got 3 sheets of felonies. Everybody is not opening their door to me. This is what reality says, okay? Now I'm going to forget how grateful I was and tell him that, no, you know what? I'm not telling nobody else that one. I don't know if I can do another 5 years of this. All I'm sitting here to tell you today is this right here. If you lose your job, you need some help getting through it, I can share my experience, strength, and hope with you and help you get through it, and I want you to know that you don't have to use no matter what. I highly recommend that you don't tell your boss to take nothing and shove it. Shit. You know, and I read something, you know, we'll cry for no reason and we'll say and do stuff for no, that was one of, look, I'm gonna be honest with me. That's the stupidest shit I ever did in my life. Every time I see my co-workers rolling by me, I'm mad as hell. If I had kept that job, I'd be vested for a pension. I'm over 50 years old. I don't have a pension coming. But God has been good to me these last 5 years, and I know he's going to continue if I continue to do the things that I need to do, and I'm doing that. I'm coming here. I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I'm not the addict that has accumulated clean time, and I'm not concerned about people. I ran into a woman at this convention who told me she met me 5 years ago, and when I met her, I helped her. I told her, I said, well, I don't remember you. I said, because you were new then, and you looking real cute today. Because she was. And you know how we blossom when we come around here? She said, you helped me. And I was appreciating her saying that, not because I helped her, y'all, but because she remembered that I helped her and the stuff that I told her worked. That's why we're here. You are not just here for you. And you need to understand that. And you can't pick and choose who you help. God didn't, what if God did that to us? You know what I'm saying? And we forget that around here because we get this time and we get these things and we think, oh, no, you can't come to my house because I got things now. You know, remember when your house was the smokehouse? Everybody was welcome. Sign, neon sign. You're welcome here. 2 tokes needed. You know, I don't ever want to forget where I came from. I don't ever want to not be of service to Narcotics Anonymous because Narcotics Anonymous saved my life, and I would not have a life if it were not for Narcotics Anonymous. And of that, I'm absolutely sure, because the only alternative to this is jails, institutions, and death. And when I had my breakdown, if institutions had been open, I'd have done all 3. Because if I had to be institutionalized for that mental illness, I'd have certainly took my life. I read this literature. I made meetings. I took those pills as long as they said I needed to take them, and they were changed a whole bunch of times. And especially, like I said, after threatening the man at the meeting. And let me tell you what I found out about the man at the meeting, and this blew me away. That man is now locked up because he has a problem with beating women. I invited the woman beater to the parking lot. You know what? I want to thank you all for allowing me to share my experience. And my experience is the stuff that actually happens along the way of this process. My strength is the spiritual principles of this program and the God of my understanding. And my hope is that everyone has an opportunity to really benefit from what this program has to offer. And what this program has to offer is freedom from active addiction one day at a time.
And it works if you work it. You do have to practice the principles in all of your affairs. The faith is absolutely key. And so is simplicity. I want to thank you for listening. And I'm done.
Speaker is going to be James H. from Indianapolis.
Right, and I've been instructed to stand up. No, it's fine. It's fine. That was a good idea.
That's me, James.
No, that was B. That was BJ. Anyway, I'm an act named James. Grateful to be here and grateful to be clean, and consider yourself privileged that I'm here because my home group is Sky's the Limit at 9:30 on Sunday mornings in Indianapolis. If you're ever there, come check us out. And I rarely ever miss that meeting. It has to be something, either I'm out of town or I'm sick to miss that meeting because that's my home group. That's the place where I'm committed to be. And but I'm grateful to be here, and thanks, Joe, for asking me to do this. I'm one of those people, though. You know, if you notice in the fellowship, this fellowship produces a lot of ministers. And whenever somebody in this fellowship becomes a minister, I always ask them, "Are you going to be a preacher or a teacher?" And they sit there and ponder for a minute. See, I'm not a. I feel more like a teacher than a speaker. I don't consider myself like a public speaker. I'm not that dynamic. But I'm a student of this program. I'm a student of this literature. And I'm grateful for the people that started that process for me. Because I used to throw that word, keeping the faith throughout your recovery. That's what I'm supposed to be talking about. And that, I used to throw that word faith around like a lot of other people I heard. Till one day somebody asked me, what does that word mean? And I was stumped. It's like, what does that word mean? And they proceeded to share some stuff with me about it. He said, you throw that word around a lot. Do you really know what it is? And the way it was explained to me, I don't take credit for this because everything you hear me share, nothing is original. It's something somebody in Narcotics Anonymous has taught me. But he said that faith was a process, that you just don't get it automatically. And what I came to realize was, at some point, I have to surrender to the fact that I'm powerless in my life. That's what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to surrender to the fact that I was powerless. And this is kind of how the steps transpired too. He said, then you come to believe in something different. If you can't do it, you need to believe something different. And so I used to interchange the word belief and faith. And he said, belief ain't faith. It's just a suspicion. I said, that's deep. He said, but if you believe something, it'll change your actions, you know. And after you change your actions and get some results, then you might proceed to faith. And he said that intellectually, and it sounded good, but then how does that apply to this recovery thing? First of all, when I got here, I did not come here to stay clean. I did not believe this. I didn't believe y'all was clean. I came here with a plan, and that was to save a job and a marriage. And I didn't really need to do what y'all was doing. So I didn't need no need for faith and belief and all that other stuff. But I did want to stay clean for 6 months. And that's where I got tricked. Because all I wanted was 6 months. And I was going to move on. And what happened was, this is how this thing happens. One day I felt like using. I didn't want to use, and the only reason why I didn't want to use was I figured the way my luck is, if I use today, they're going to call me in for a drop tomorrow. So I didn't want to use that day. And you know what I did? I had heard y'all say these things at the meeting, call before you use. And I said, okay, I want to use. Let me try what they said. They said, call before you use. The only thing I had did wrong, I had limited myself to 6 people. It was only 6 people in NA that I took their phone numbers because they was the only real addicts. The rest of y'all wasn't even real addicts. And so I called these 6 numbers, and nobody was at home. Then my next thought as an addict, this don't work. They said call before you use, and now ain't nobody at home. Then I remembered something else you said. You said go to any length. So I called the numbers again. Still nobody is home. I'm at work. I'm feeling like using. I've never had this feeling before and not did anything about it. And I started, my mind started racing. And finally, I remember calling this place. And now I'm desperate. I can't reach these 6 guys. I'll talk to anybody. And I remember this guy. I got this guy on the phone. And this guy said what sounded at that time like something that was just totally asinine. I said, man, I feel like using. He said, where are you? I said, I'm at work, but I'll be off in a couple hours. I don't know what to do. And at this point, he said something that sounded real asinine. He said, say the serenity prayer. I said, what? I said, man, I don't feel like saying no prayer. I feel like getting high. You know? He said, say it, keep saying it. He said, matter of fact, pray it and believe it'll work for you. And man, that really clicked. Because I had been saying the serenity prayer at the meetings because y'all was saying it. I never personalized that it could do anything for me. But that's what I did that day. And I wound up getting with those guys. They hung out with me. We went to a meeting. After the meeting, they hung out with me. And about maybe 7 hours later, that feeling left. And in that process, something said, this thing might work. You know, I still wasn't buying into the whole thing because, like I said, all I needed was 6 months, but y'all got me over that hump. So I knew at that point, if I called before I used, there was a possibility I wouldn't use because I had some evidence in front of me now. So I believe that will work. You know, I remember going to the meetings, and I wanted to use every day. I think somebody else shared that earlier. I wanted to use every day for about my first year or so here. But what I noticed was when I went to the meetings, I felt okay. I felt safe. After the meetings, I didn't. But in the meetings, I felt okay. What I'm saying is it's like not even believing, but I had surrendered to the fact that I could not stop using on my own. So I out of just a quaint belief, I had a suspicion that if I came around here and did what y'all was doing, that I wouldn't have to use for these 6 months. And that's all I wanted. And after doing that for a while, you know what? I had some faith that I could make it to those 6 months because I had a couple peers. Then a couple things that happened. I remember coming to the meetings and this guy said his brother died. And I said, well, I know he got to go get high now because that's the way you deal with death. And he came to the meeting, he talked about it, he cried, and he didn't use. I didn't know within a couple of months I was going to have to deal with that situation. My sister died. And I really had good reasons to use behind that because the year before, she had double kidney failure. And we were trying to find somebody in the family to match up. And I was afraid it was going to be me to match up. And everybody would find out that I'm strung out on drugs, like they didn't know anyway. You know? But, you know, that's how that denial is, you know. But like I said, when my sister died, the first thing I did that night, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when I got that information, the very first thing I did was call my sponsor. The very first thing. And I talked to him, and he asked me, did you need me to come over? I said, well, I'm going over with the family and this, that, and the other. And it was something real strange. I didn't know how you made obituaries. Like, I was shook up. I went over there, and actually my family had kind of come to terms with it. They were laughing and joking about my sister, how she was. You know, she was very egotistical, and you know, and they were just laughing. What name are we're gonna put her nickname in the paper? And it's like, I'm sitting there traumatized, and they're acting like this is, I guess they were normal because they don't use. They weren't sitting around debating getting high. They were like moving on with this process. And you know, I got some more belief. And then after the funeral and everything worked out, I had some faith that I could survive a death without using. And it was really strange because I remember in the middle of the funeral, I was surrounded. I got a big family. There was a lot of people there, but I remember being in this crowded church and feeling all alone, like nobody understood what I was feeling. And I turned around, looked in the back, and there were some addicts there. And it's like I knew I would be okay. You know, it's one of those experiences you can't explain. You know, but still in the back of my mind, I'm not gonna stay here. I'm just biding my time to get out of here. And there was some other thing. I had some financial disasters. I kept going through these things that were using things that I wasn't using about. And the only thing I could say was I was coming to these meetings. I had a sponsor. He had put me to work in the program. I was a good addict because I wasn't going to be here anyway, so I'm just going to do everything y'all going to do. And I was going to be gone. But in that process, I always say I went to that one meeting too many and something clicked. All of a sudden, my grand plan wasn't making any sense. It's like, because I always said I was going to go back. And one day I asked myself, go back to what? You know, them nasty, funky dope houses, them guns in your faces, the police locking you up, the miserable Sunday mornings like this morning, you know, where you done lied to everybody, connived, no money, most of the stores is closed, and all that miserable stuff, but you dope sick, you know. Go back to that, you know. And I hadn't bought into this thing yet, but I still, you know, it was breaking me down little by little. Because I remember at 9 months I was going to use. And I had planned it. Well, first thing happened. At 6 months I was going to use. I kind of started liking the meetings, so I was going to come to the meetings. I had it all planned that morning. I was going to call my sponsor, talk to him, go to the meeting, get y'all out the way. Then I was going to get high. I was going to come back to the meeting the next day and not tell nobody. Well, at 6 months, I got my first 12-step call. And I'm wondering, why they calling me? There's other people with more time than me. She said, well, you was the only one at home. We need you to do this 12-step call. It's like, okay, I'll go do this 12-step call, then I'll use. Well, anyway, in the process of doing this 12-step call, this guy, he was nuts. And then an older member came, and he had some faith that I didn't have because we was trying to get the guy in treatment, and they said all the beds were full, and the older guy said, oh, just have some faith. And it's like, hurry up and get this guy in treatment so I can go get high. And, well, what happened, we got a phone call at this place, and all of a sudden, a bed opened for this guy. So we wound up getting him in treatment. 10:30 that night, I'm at home, tired from this all-day process with this guy. And it dawned on me I hadn't used, you know. And then, like I said, 9 months I planned on using. And I had a super plan this time. It wasn't no 12-step call, nothing bothered me. I was going to call my sponsor, go to a meeting, get high, and I wasn't going to tell nobody. At this point, though, the sponsor had me praying and building this relationship with a God, and I could figure out how to get rid of everybody but God. So I think that was the last time I planned on using. I've been around here since September 9th, 1986. So see what a plan I had? But you know what? What I realized as an addict, I had did something really foolish. All NA asks you to do is commit to a day. I came in here and committed to 6 months. You know, I did more than what you asked for. But you know, that part, that's where that process of faith came, that I could stay clean, that I could be a part of this process. You know, like I said, I didn't believe it. I came to believe, changed my behavior, got some results. Then I had faith that I didn't have to use. I had faith that I can get through some life circumstances without using. You know, because ultimately, words are just an agreement. We call this a table because everybody agrees it's a table. Somebody else might call it a duck, you know, in another. It's just words of agreement. Because certain words are kind of tricky, especially those spiritual words like faith. Because when I looked it up in the dictionary, the first thing it said is religious belief. And that almost kind of left me out of the equation because I don't practice a form of religion. But I had to develop what that word meant for me personally on a personal level, you know. And what it is trusting. That word, I trust that certain things could happen in my life. I don't always know, but I trust. And like coming here, it was kind of funny. We got lost. I can identify with it, getting lost. And but it was amazing. We got lost, but I was asleep. The reason why I got lost was I took a nap, and the guy driving got lost. I woke up. Wait a minute. I woke up and I knew something was wrong. And I called the guy and got directions, and we got back around and got here. But it was something about that. I just didn't feel right. I said, we went too far, you know. And it happened. We turned around. We made it here. And the weird thing about, I mean, it's like to me, I didn't believe we was going to get here. I kept seeing them NA signs, and then it's like, we're going further into the woods, and then I saw another NA sign. It's like, where is this place? It's kind of reminded me, I went to this meeting, it's outside of Indianapolis. When I moved to Indianapolis, this guy was going to this meeting that I had never went to. And I said, well, I'm going to go to that meeting with you. It's a different meeting. And it was scary because we was going to this meeting, and I'm an inner city type guy. This meeting was kind of out there. I remember this guy turned on this dark road, and we was going down this dark road. We was like going and going. It's like, and I looked at him. I said, I think I'm all right with this guy. But where the hell is he taking me? And finally, it was like we was going to some woods, and finally everything opened up, and there was this church there, and that's where the meeting was. But I was, like I said, I'm an inner city type guy, and it was a little scary for a lot of reasons. But I remember the church was so strange. The church was wide open. You never needed a key. And I always remember a line I saw in that church that still sticks with me today. It's like, it said, service begins when the meeting is over. I said, man, that is deep. But so this process of faith that I built early on, I didn't know how much I was going to need it later on in recovery, because I had a situation similar to yours. For some reason, back in, first of all, in 91, found out I was diabetic. As an addict, my mind said, you're going to go blind, you're going to become impotent, they're going to start cutting your limbs off. That's the way addicts think. You know, I don't think. And I remember talking to my sister, who was a nurse, said, you know, you could be much healthier as a diabetic if you take care of it than you normally would. And so I went on this trek. It's like, and it was at a NA convention that I found out, because they put me on the insulin right away. And I was at we was going to Louisville to a convention, and I left all my little survival kit at home. And I remember sitting in that hotel room saying, it was some people coming the next day, so I had called and arranged for them to pick my stuff up. But I sit there and said, what would happen if I didn't have this stuff? And I said, well, people used to die. But what the inspiration I got is like, what can I do about this? And I did some research, and I changed my diet very radically. I haven't eaten any meat since then. And I made this bet with my wife that I said, I'm going to change my diet, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to do everything I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to get off this insulin, because I don't like being dependent on anything. And I told the doctor, and he just told me to be careful and this, that, and the other. But within 4 or 5 months, I was off it totally. And it kind of blew me away, that I had that much success. But it was like the faith, the early faith that I got from this process, it let me know I could do anything. And what recovery has given me today is I don't feel like I'm losing. I feel like I'm freed from things today, not losing things, you know. Because I used to think it was a tragedy. I can't do this no more. No, I'm freed from all that stuff, you know. And it's through this process. First I surrender, then I come to believe, then I take some actions, and from the results, that's where the faith comes. You know, everything, because in that process, then I was off work for a long time. I got in 3 car accidents in 18 months. I got rear-ended twice and head-on by a drunk driver. Wind up with neck surgery. And I was off work for a long time. And there were some things happen, you know. It's like when you don't have any income coming in, you have to make some hard decisions. Like one time I had the decision, was I going to keep the gas on or was I going to get the phone cut off? And I'm the big shot in NA. I can't get my phone cut off. You know, I mean, I can't get my phone cut off. I got clean time. But I got kids also, and it's about to get cold in Indianapolis, so I had to let the phone go. You know, but it was one of those decisions I had to make. It was a practical decision. You know, my funds were limited, but I was off work like 10 months with no income. But I realized at the end of that 10 months, I didn't do anything super special, but I ate every day, I had a roof over my head, and all my basic needs were met, you know. And I didn't even appreciate that till after the fact, because when I was going through it seemed like a rough process, but this power that I have faith in has brought me through situation after situation after situation. And does that mean I got 5 minutes? Okay, that means I got about 2 minutes then. Yeah, but I'm going to wrap this up. Faith is really one of the cornerstones of my recovery. It's one of those invisible principles. I can't draw it out tangibly for you, but it's a feeling that I have as a result of being in this process, that I trust this process, I trust this fellowship. I know individuals I can't necessarily trust because you can't always trust me. I'll fall short. But I know in this process there's somebody that has what I need. And one thing I always tell people, don't ever brag on your kids or addicts, because they'll make a fool out of you every time. You know, but I trust this process as a whole. I trust this fellowship. I trust this power, and it's a collective power, however you look at it. You know, we say God of our understanding, which means it's a collective understanding that there's some loving, caring, and greater than all of us. That's why we're here. And I was looking at some of this literature over here, and I was thinking, boy, they had some unbelievable faith in the 50s when you can get arrested for just saying you're an addict. And they tried to come together to create what we have today. You know, because I don't even know if those laws are still on the book, but I remember being arrested for being a common addict. The police would they knew where we all hung out. They would roll down on you, roll your sleeves up. If you had tracks, let's go. You know, you didn't have to do nothing, just being a common addict, you know, and it's awesome, you know, what we have today, you know, and I'm like to thank Joe again for asking me to do this. This is awesome. And I'm gonna say this before I close. I'm one of those weirdos. I like to find these God spots in the world. And what a God spot is where water, nature, sky all come together without nothing man-made. If you find one of those spots around here, they're kind of hard to find. Nothing is man-made. It's all God. And I look for them everywhere I go. And I got here late last night, and when I got in the cabin, I didn't know there was a lake right outside my window. Man, I woke up, I looked out, and it's like, man, there's my God spot. You know, and this is truly, truly awesome. And I'm going to sit down, shut up. Grateful to be here.